was reminded the other day that it's been suggested that every character, every archetype, every symbol in every story is an aspect of our own being, our own psychic makeup. And that means that every story is our story. There's a story that has many versions from many different sources. Let's see what meaning it evokes in us now. It's a story of that merchant who, with his wife, led what we would call a good life. He had well-being, his business was prosperous, he kept the faith of his day, he gave charity to those in need. But the couple had one regret. They had no child in their life, and they longed for a child. Now we know that in most persuasions there is that time, those occasions, usually marked by a festival day, when, with the proper rituals and vigils and practices, our wishes or great change can take place. So, with this festival day looming, our couple decided that they would devote themselves avidly to the practices in the hope that a child could be conceived. And indeed they did. For days they kept their vigil, they fasted, they undertook the rituals, they intoned the prayers. And indeed, at a particular moment, in coming together in union, it was known that a child had been conceived. And that very night, the wife had a dream. She dreamt that indeed she was to give birth, and that this child would be special. This child would have a jewel, a gem. But in her dream, it was emphasized that when this child was born, that this gem must be kept with it at all times, intimating that this gem contained the soul of the child. So indeed, 9 months later, a child was born, a girl, and from the very earliest days it was known she was special. And indeed, a gem had been found in her hand at birth. Now, the merchant had a special chain made that could be placed around the neck of his daughter that held this gem, and they were very careful to keep it with her at all times. And as she grew, they protected her, fearful that someone would take her gem. So she was very sheltered through her early life. But indeed she was special. She sang like a nightingale. She could play any instrument, the lute, the flute, the harp. She was extraordinarily beautiful, but she was not allowed out to mix with others, being very sheltered. But one day it was learned that the queen of that realm was going to the public baths, and she invited all the women to come and join her there. So the young maiden, whose name was Kosava, which meant star, begged her mother to allow her to go and be in the presence of the queen. Now when Kosava went to the public baths, people gasped at her beauty. And of course, this came to the ears of the queen, and she asked that this maiden be brought forth to her, being told that not only was she extraordinarily beautiful, but that she could sing like an angel and play any instrument. So when she was brought before the queen immediately recognized that she was more beautiful even than herself. So she asked Kosava to sing for her, and everyone present was transported by the melodious, mellifluous voice. And then the queen asked her to play various instruments, and she did with great accomplishment. So the queen said to the mother of Kosava, "This girl must come with me to my palace." Now the mother was very reluctant, but of course she could not go against the wishes of the queen. So Kosava went in the carriage with the queen back to her palace. But the queen's thoughts were not kindly. She did not want her son, the prince, to see this beautiful maiden. So as soon as they arrived, she was taken down to a dungeon and locked within, with the queen's intent to let her starve to death. But as it happened, the guards, interacting with this beautiful, not only beautiful but kind and gentle maiden, brought food to her. But one day the queen wanted to find out whether she was still alive, and was very surprised when she went down to the dungeon to see that Kosava was still radiantly beautiful. But then the queen noticed that in the dimness of that dungeon that something was shining, and she noticed around Kosava's neck the gem which had a luminescence of its own. She demanded of Kosava to give it to her, but Kosava remembered well her parents' words, "Never remove this from your neck." But when she refused, the queen tore it on its chain from around her throat. Immediately, Kosava fainted away and went into a deep sleep. The queen was delighted, and she called the guards to take Kosava into the forest and leave her there for the wild animals. to devour, thinking she was dead. But when the guards took her out into the forest, they perceived that she was still breathing. So they took her to a hut that they knew in the depths of the forest and laid her there. Of course, we know this story, but to continue, the days passed, and one day the prince of the realm was out hunting in the forest when he came to the hut, and thinking that he would go in to take a rest, was greatly surprised to see this extraordinarily beautiful maiden laying there. He perceived that she was breathing, and he wondered what he could do. But he went back to the palace, and he said to his mother, "I have found the maiden I wish to marry." "Is she a princess?" said the queen. And he said, "Surely she is a princess amongst women." "Oh," said the queen, "then you should take a gift to her." And the queen brought out the gem that she had torn from the throat of Cassava and gave it to the prince. He took it to the hut and laid it on the chest of the beautiful maiden, and immediately she opened her eyes and, looking up at him, asked, "Where am I? Who are you?" And so it was that plans for their wedding were made. Everyone was invited to the feast to celebrate, even the merchant and his wife. No one knew who the bride-to-be was, and when she came to the palace, she was veiled with 7 veils. When these veils were removed, immediately the merchant and his wife recognized their beloved daughter. But when the queen beheld Cassava, she believed that she was seeing a ghost, and in great fear she ran and was never seen again. We know the end of the story: the marriage, the ruling of that kingdom with kindness and grace, the prosperity of that kingdom. But this story, like all those similar stories, recognizing that every character, symbol and archetype are aspects of our self, our story. But the question is asked and arises, what is it that this gem represents for us? What is it then that when it's away from us, so to speak, we fall asleep? Perhaps over these years that we've been together, Sometimes it might have been said to you, don't forget who you are. What does this mean for us? What is this gem that when it's away from us, we're asleep? What does this gem represent for us? In the story, it contained Kusava's soul. But what does that mean for us? Our soul. We don't need to remember our soul. So what does this gem represent for us? What is it that you cannot forget in your life now? What is it that stops us from falling asleep? What is it? It keeps us ever awake, ever present, ever alert. What is this gem for you? What is it that's meant when it's said to you, don't forget who you are?